Hello. This video will cover the first of 10 common home earthquake vulnerabilities, the lack of foundation anchorage. My name is BJ Kier. I'm a structural and earthquake engineer in the Portland, Oregon area. If you were to ask advice on how to improve your home's ability to withstand an earthquake, a common answer you would get is make sure your home is bolted to the foundation or anchored to the foundation. And that's kind of a generalization, but it's good advice in general. And this vulnerability is so common that Oregon now requires disclosure of it when selling a home in Oregon. Damage to wood frame houses in earthquakes tends to occur at or below the foundation level. And this is where all of the weight of the house is, and this is kind of where the house feels the shaking the most, closest to the ground. And a typical house consists of wood framing sitting on a concrete foundation, a continuous concrete foundation. And the wood framing has to be adequately connected to the concrete foundation to avoid slippage on that interface. Without adequate anchorage, a strong earthquake can overcome the friction that is along that plane at the top of the foundation, and the house can shift off the foundation. This isn't a particularly dangerous vulnerability. It certainly could hurt someone, but it's a big economic risk to a homeowner. This damage often results in a complete loss of a house. If a house even shifts a foot, the house may need to be completely torn down and rebuilt. And maybe more importantly, when we get a Cascadia earthquake, sheltering in place is going to be very important. And so not being able to do that would be a big problem. And so that makes this addressing this vulnerability cheap insurance to address it. So generally speaking, houses before the 50s were not anchored at all. Houses between the 50s and the 90s have a generally increasing amount of anchorage and improving amount of anchorage. And then late 1990s and newer, generally sufficient anchorage. So how do you add foundation anchors? Well, you need to complete the entire seismic load path from the first floor to the foundation. And in this picture, I've drawn a house that either has a crawl space or a basement. These are the existing concrete walls, maybe the basement floor. And it's a little bit more complicated than just adding some anchorage. It's important to determine, first of all, if the house has a cripple wall. Many houses do, and if they do have a cripple wall, you have an additional vulnerability, and that's covered in the video number 2. Here's an example that I've drawn over here of a condition that does not have a cripple wall. This is where the concrete foundation comes all the way up, and the first floor joists are resting on a continuous wood plate that's sitting on top of the concrete wall. And the seismic load path goes something like this. You have the first floor here, which loads tend to work their way into the floors. The floor kind of acts as a system, and we call it a diaphragm. But there's existing nailing here connecting the floor to what's called a rim board. This is the typical condition. The rim board has to be not rotting. It has to be stout enough as is to be able to take the seismic load path and work its way down. And we're talking about forces that are going in and out of the plane of the board that I've drawn this on here. From the rim board, you typically need to add a clip here attaching the rim board to the wood mud sill here. And then through that clip you get into the mud sill, and then the mud sill is going to transfer loads. You could anchor downward, but often you don't have room to do that, and so there are specialty plates. Simpson makes one called the URFP. That's the most common. It's kind of a funny shape here, and it transfers the load from this wood piece through this funny shape into some type of screw anchor, epoxy anchor, something like that goes into the side of the wall there. So you've completed the load path from the first floor all the way to the concrete. And you have to have reasonable confidence that this concrete is not going to crumble apart. So there's a lot to think about. The ways you do this, and by the way, you would just repeat this on all 4 sides of the house, something similar to this. The entire load path is important. It's like a chain. If you have a single weak link, like if you forgot to add a clip here, then you could actually get slippage right here. And so it's important that it's done right. the way you would go about doing it is you typically would hire a seismic retrofit contractor. These are specialty contractors that only do this type of work, and then they know how to do this. You could get an engineer like me involved. I'd recommend that, especially if your house is more complicated and you think you have another vulnerability. But it's typically not necessary if you think that's the only one or the only major one. And you could also do it yourself. It's a little complicated, so most people don't have the patience for it or the maybe experience or a skill level to do it. But if you look down below in this, I'll attach a link that links to a typical prescriptive plan set that would kind of tell you about what type and how many anchors to use based on the configuration, the number of stories, etc. of your house. So I hope this video was helpful. Feel free to leave questions or comments. Let me know if I can help you with your home or building. Thanks for watching.